Good afternoon. Welcome to the Midday Mull for Tuesday the 27th of February. Once again, I have the beauty of the garden but the noise of the suburbs. With Robert Murray McShane, we're working through his readings, his family readings, and the two chapters in the family readings today are Exodus chapter 10 and Luke chapter 13, and there's a link in theme there. In Exodus chapter 10 we have the last few general plagues in Egypt before the death of the firstborn, and how we have locusts coming on Egypt as a result of the Pharaoh's hardness of heart, and then the plague of darkness, because Pharaoh said, I will not let the people go, resisting what God is calling him to do. And the plagues and the suffering that come with those plagues are a direct result of his behavior and what he does and his choices. And so there's a sense in which suffering is sometimes God's judgment on disobedience. But then in Luke's Gospel in chapter 13, some people come to Jesus with a question, and they raise the question and tell Jesus about, we're told, the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mixed with their sacrifices. Now clearly they thought that those Galileans probably deserved what they got. And Jesus' response is, do you think that these Galileans were worse sinners than all the other Galileans because they suffered in this way? I tell you no. But unless you repent, you too will all perish. And so Jesus is saying, no, it's not a straight one for one. Sometimes suffering might be God's judgment. Usually suffering isn't. It is just part of living in a fallen world. And we need to recognize that all suffering is a consequence of humanity's sin, not individual sin. God didn't make the world that we would suffer, that there'd be famines, that there would be disease, that there'd be that kind of unpleasantness and suffering. He designed a perfect world that was good. Our sin perverted it. And the suffering comes, and the fallenness of the world is a result of human sinfulness, not about our individual sins. Sometimes our individual lifestyles may have unpleasant consequences. If I chain smoke all my life, I then get lung cancer. That's a consequence of my behavior. Likewise, an alcoholic who has cirrhosis of the liver, or somebody addicted to gambling who loses their house, those are consequences of our choices and what we do. They're not judgments on our sin. And as Christians, we need to remember this, that Jesus says, no, suffering wasn't a direct result of sin. They weren't more sinful. They're just part of a sinful world. And then the challenge we're given by Jesus is, unless you repent, you too will perish. And we need to recognize we're all sinners. We all fall short. We all have all sorts of problems and need to repent. And so don't judge people in their suffering. 90% of the time it's not a result of anything they've done. It's just being part of this world. And likewise for ourselves. The devil would have us blame ourselves. We must be careful of doing that. And instead we need to turn to God and say, as sinners in a sinful world, with all our suffering, we repent and we turn to you. Give us life. As we do that, we're blessed.